So I really like starting some of these Hunting 101 type events with talking about the connection to conservation. Full disclosure, I took this PowerPoint from a Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Hunt for Sustainability Turkey workshop I ran like 2 years ago. And I did some updating last night, but it's a little all over the place. I'm not giving myself much credit here. So we're gonna jump around a bit. I had a way longer time to talk about a lot of these topics, so I have a lot of slides that I left in here that I will give to Luke to give out to you all. I'm not gonna go into as much detail that's in here now, just because it's kind of dense and boring, and you have access to the information. You can read it on your own. You don't need me to read the slides. I'll try to stay on this side so I stop blocking the screen. So, like I was saying, a while back, and Luke was saying, we had abundant wildlife in this country. Then we exploited it. I'm sure many of you have heard the stories of the passenger pigeon, and we almost completely wiped out turkey and deer because we just overhunted them. We thought they were infinite and never-ending renewable resources, and we hunted a lot of species almost to extinction, if not to extinction. And then around 1900, 1929, that's Teddy Roosevelt time period, we start getting into some laws and regulations around hunting. So before that, it was largely unregulated. It was the Wild West. Literally, people could do whatever they want, sell game, meat, furs, everything was trade-based. And then 1900s to I would say late 1960s is our early wildlife management, game management, where we start putting science behind our game management. Moving into 1965 to 1980, we start getting more holistic environmental management, not just managing land for one species or not just trying to recover turkey and only turkey at one time. It's way more holistic, and again, we're putting more laws and regulations into place to protect all habitat and all the environment. And then we will get into 1980s and 2000s. I'll get into that in a little more detail because that's what's most relevant to you all here. But the gist of it is, around the 1980s, hunting started declining as kind of a pastime, a leisure activity, and we started in the wildlife management world noticing some negative repercussions of the decline of hunting. So there have been some practices and efforts like R3, recruitment, retention, reactivation, to bring hunting back to the forefront, make it relevant again, and talk about how it does connect to conservation. So the important parts of, or not necessarily important, my favorite parts of the protection and regulation era is really some of these big names in the wildlife conservation world, the Aldo Leopolds, the Teddy Roosevelts. It's really where we started merging hunting and conservation science and preserving, protecting natural resources for their intrinsic value, not just their utility to us as humans. And we will go more into Pittman-Robertson Act. Raise your hand if you have heard of the Pittman-Robertson Act. You know what PR dollars are. Okay, we got a few that do, a few that don't. That's cheating over here. I know you know. Do you go into PR or not really? Okay, cool. I'm going to come back to it, and if I forget, remind me, because I'm pretty sure there's a slide about it. But PR dollars, if you hear wildlife managers, professors, DNR people say PR dollars, that is DNR getting money from the federal government based on how many people buy ammo and guns. They buy hunting licenses. All of that is taxed, and those tax dollars come directly back to the states. So there's something like 67% of state agencies' money across the country comes from PR dollars. So the fewer people buying hunting licenses, that's a huge issue for agencies that are trying to do any type of wildlife management, game or otherwise. They're losing money when people stop buying guns, ammo, hunting licenses. The Dingell-Johnson Act is basically the same thing, but for fishing. And that's not my area of expertise, so we're gonna skip over that too. All right, this is one of my favorite quotes. I use it in almost every presentation I give. Without hunting, fishing, and trapping, conservation in this country collapses. So we'll talk about that, and like I would love to open it up to discussion if there are any questions or other thoughts, because I know there are diverse backgrounds in this room. But not only financially, hunting supports wildlife management as a whole. So we'll go into kind of the three big ways hunting is valuable to American society, I would say. Ecologically, hunting is a really cost-efficient and effective wildlife management tool. If we didn't have hunters helping us here in Maryland manage white-tailed deer populations, imagine how many more deer vehicle collisions we would have. Imagine how many more like sick deer and starving deer populations we would have, because we don't have hunters controlling some of that population. Because what did we do? We kicked out predators. So if there's no natural predator to manage deer, the hunter takes that role. And as a state agency, we can't do it all ourselves. So hunting is really cost efficient because the state doesn't necessarily have to do all of that management hands-on. Culturally, this one is a bit controversial, but I would say hunting does have deep roots in American history, no matter what angle you look at it from. There are a lot of traditions that are worth preserving and worth continuing on. In particular, I would say hunting, trapping, fishing gives the participant a really unique connection to nature, a connection, an ancestral connection that you may not get with other forms of non-consumptive recreation, right? You're connected to the land in a different way, in a deeper way, whether you grew up hunting or not. That is something that, like, you all in the room are here for a reason. That is value that you see. So if we could get other people who maybe wrote off this workshop right away because they said, hunting? No way, I'm not gonna kill something. That's really mean. I can't do that. And they don't understand the type of connection to nature you get when you are hunting. Like, that is why we have to preserve that type of culture around hunting. And then, like we said, financially, hunting supports all of our state agencies across the country, not just Maryland, but that 67% was a national statistic, I believe. And it's been a couple years since I brushed up on my numbers, but it's something close to 70% across the country. NSSF, National Shooting Sports Foundation. If you're ever curious about, like, really the numbers of what you're getting into, they have a ton of great fact sheets and information on their website. So I pulled a couple graphics that you are also welcome to go dig into more. It's a really great infographic. I know you probably can't read it from where you're sitting, but I wanted to include it so when we send this out to you, you have access to it. You can, again, get it on the NSSF website yourself. I use a bunch of this information all the time when I'm talking about the value of hunting and the importance of hunting for conservation. Yeah, it basically just talks about where the money is coming from and going in more detail. Like we already said, guns, ammo, license sales are the largest contributor to our state agencies' funding. We can also see that hunting has, like, helped populations. So white-tailed deer, we are talking about them being like a nuisance species and we need less of them, but we also need hunters to keep them at carrying capacity. Like, the regulations our scientists put in place is not so we get to the point where we're wiping out deer completely, right? Like, we are just using hunters basically as the apex predator to keep all of the balances in check. So hunting has actually helped ducks, deer, waterfowl in general, not just ducks, turkey, Rocky Mountain elk doesn't apply to us in Maryland, but and antelope, also not here in Maryland. But yeah, hunting has helped grow these populations and keep them at appropriate levels, rather than having too many where the environment can't sustain them and we're getting a lot of disease and death and human-wildlife conflict, but also not unregulated hunting where we're just completely wiping them out and making species go extinct. And I think I am just about done with time. So I think there's 7, yeah. Just leave these up for a second. Again, you'll have access to this, so don't feel like you have to scramble to write it all down. But that timeline that I had on the screen earlier largely informed the North American model of wildlife conservation. So our 7 tenets of the model are wildlife resources are a public trust. That's different than the very beginning of the timeline where basically if you were a white man who owned land, you owned the wildlife that was on your land. Now wildlife is a public trust. Markets for game are eliminated, so we're not selling game meat like we do with beef and pork and things like that. Allocation for wildlife is by law, so we have all of the Clean Air Act and things that we kind of skipped through earlier. Wildlife can be killed only for a legitimate purpose, so again we put these regulations into place to make sure these species are kept within reasonable populations. Wildlife is considered an international resource, so that goes into migratory game birds, and other species as well. They don't care where our boundaries are. We have plenty of species that cross the Canada border, cross the Mexico border, cross our states' borders. So wildlife has to be managed internationally, nationally at the very least. So we have plenty of laws that are federal laws that we also follow here in Maryland because we're protecting the species as a whole, no matter where they travel, because a lot of times it's outside of our small state of Maryland. And science is the proper tool. So I think we can, I believe we talk about this more later today as well, but there are plenty of informal ethics of hunting that we can definitely go into as we get into some of the hands-on activities. But the big 3 that I learned were knowing and respecting game. So the more you know the species that you're hunting, the more you study their biology, their habitat, their lives, the more you're able to respect that game and make a clean kill. I was embarrassed to say I was very surprised when I started getting more into hunting, and the hunters that I met maybe didn't complete a 4-year college degree, but they knew more about the biology of their local habitat than anybody I had ever met in my entire life. And that was a very biased and bigoted way of me to think, but I was very surprised when I met these folks and they could tell me every single species of tree, blade of grass, anything when we went outside, and those were things that I didn't learn in my 4-year biology degree. So the more you can just know about your environment and the game, the better you will be at hunting. Knowing and obeying the law, also a big one. I've said it 10 times, I'll say it again. The laws that we make and the regulations we make around hunting are there for a reason. We're trying to protect the wildlife. And then behaving in the right manner, which you're all adults. You can all use common sense. A lot of this just comes down to etiquette. These are not written rules. They're not laws that you have to follow, but it's just about being a respectful human being. So respecting other hunters in the field if you're hunting on public land, respecting folks who are non-hunters and are maybe really uneasy with seeing blood, seeing dead animals, seeing hunting happen. Respecting habitat, so leaving no trace, packing out what you pack in, respecting property boundaries. There are plenty of public lands that border right up to private land, and you have to know where those boundaries are because there may be a private landowner that does not want you on their land. Those are the big ones. And then I included this just for fun because I told you I updated this PowerPoint from a turkey presentation. This is my favorite picture. It's me eating a turkey leg at the Renaissance Festival. My favorite pastime, eating turkey legs at the Ren Fair. And my 3 big takeaways, I don't know why they're all number 1. I guess because I ranked them evenly, I don't know. Hunting has been and remains fundamental to conservation in the US. Personally, I would love to see our funding system change in the future to not solely or not so much rely on ammo, gun taxes, license sales. I think broadening our base of funding is a really great idea, but the government is slow. So right now it still remains fundamental. Hunting regulations and practices are guided by science, laws, and shared ethics. So a lot of the things we'll talk about today are not written down in stone anywhere. They're just like a informal code of ethics that most all hunters abide by. And like we said, a lot of species were once near extinct, and due to hunting and regulated legal hunting, they are now thriving in the US. I can pull up some turkey stats later, but there's some crazy statistics where like all it took was relocating one population back to the Eastern Shore, and now they're like thriving again, and we can safely hunt a bunch of turkey. Any questions before I move on? Sweet.